Greetings and welcome back to Scriptures Unlocked. I'll be continuing the series on marriage, divorce, and remarriage. In the first part in this series, I looked at the biblical view of marriage as presented in the Scriptures from both the Old and New Testament. This presentation will be delving into the whole issue of marriage, divorce, and remarriage. Was it allowed by God? So that's what we'll be discussing as we go through this presentation. There has been much confusion surrounding this hotly debated issue of marriage, divorce, and remarriage in the world, but more so in the church. My aim in these videos is to present a proper biblical understanding of this highly controversial topic by using the totality of scriptures and by looking at what God has stated on the matter. My thesis statement is simply this: God made provision for divorce and remarriage in his law. It has always been God's ideal for husbands and wives to cleave together instead of being separated or divorced. So God's law does not promote divorce, but it does permit divorce, and that is a biblical fact. Friends, I tend to be very meticulous when doing Bible studies. So I intend, as usual, to provide a lot of scriptural support for everything that will be said in this presentation, so that it can be clearly seen how and why I have arrived at the conclusions drawn. You, the viewers, have been empaneled to be the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, and will be called upon to render the verdict as to what is the truth on this matter as this series unfolds. I'll be looking at the traditional teaching on the issue of divorce and remarriage with a view to present the correct biblical understanding on the matter. I will be debunking the conventional church position and teaching on divorce and remarriage, which states that a divorced person commits adultery if they remarry, and I will prove that that is wrong. It will be proven that the traditional church position that teaches that only death breaks the marriage bond is wrong. It will also be shown that it's absolutely wrong to teach that adultery is committed if someone remarries after divorce while their former spouse is still alive. It will also be demonstrated that it is definitely wrong to teach that the only option available to a divorced individual is either to remarry their former spouse or remain celibate for the rest of their lives. These are some of the arguments that have been made in this debate on marriage, divorce, and remarriage. My friends, I'll be sharing my sermon notes as usual as I take us through this presentation. So let's go to my sermon notes, or my study notes that is, as we look at the issue of marriage, divorce, and remarriage. Although God's law made provision for divorce, as will be shown, this presentation, my friends, is not intended to promote divorce, but simply to clarify the issues surrounding the topic of divorce and remarriage by using the scriptures. My encouragement is to married people to stay married, work on your relationship, compromise where necessary, and pray about any issues that may arise. God's ideal for marriage was for a man to cleave unto his wife, Genesis 2, verse 24. In very much the same way that he expects us to cleave to him. And you can see this in Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 20, and Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 22. However, God knew that because of sin, my friends, and the hardness of men's heart, many will not be able to uphold his original plan, so the Almighty made provision for persons to end their marital relationship by means of a divorce. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, if we really want to know God's will or God's law on a particular subject, then the only place to go is to his law that is written in the Torah. And that is the first 5 books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. God's law concerning divorce and remarriage can only be found in Deuteronomy chapter 24, verse 1 to 4. However, before reading what the law says on the matter, it is important to put in context what the scriptures say about the law of God. Psalm 19 declares, emphatically, I might add, reading from verse 7, the law of Jehovah is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony of Jehovah is sure, making wise the simple. The statutes of Jehovah are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of Jehovah is pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of Jehovah is clean, enduring forever. The judgments of Jehovah are true and altogether, and righteous altogether. The scriptures say that the law of Jehovah is perfect, which means it is flawless and faultless. My friends, so without further ado, let's see what God's law has to say as it concerns the issue of divorce and remarriage in Deuteronomy chapter 24, reading from verse 1 to 4. This is what God has to say on the matter. When a man had taken a wife and married her, there is the marriage, and it come to pass that she find no favor in his eyes. Then let him write her a bill of divorcement and give it in her hand and send her out of his house. There is a provision for divorce. Verse 2 says, and when she is departed out of his house, she may go and be another man's wife. That is remarriage, my friends. Verse 3, and if the latter husband hate her, and write her a bill of divorcement, and give it in her hand, and send it her out of his house, or if the latter husband die, which took her to be his wife, her former husband, which sent her away, may not take her again to be his wife. After that, she is defiled, for that is an abomination before Jehovah. And thou shalt not cause the land to sin, which Jehovah thy God giveth thee for an inheritance. The above reflects God's law as it relates to marriage, divorce, and remarriage. So any debate and discussion on the matter must take these verses into consideration because they are critical to understanding this issue. The law found in Deuteronomy chapter 24, verse 1 to 4 was written by Moses, and it provides us with some very useful and valuable information in settling the debate as to whether marriage or whether divorce and remarriage was permitted. Let me digress, my friends, so that we can get a better understanding of who Moses was. This is important because even though the first 5 books of the Bible were written by Moses and are commonly referred to as the law of Moses, what he wrote was given and commanded by God himself. Notice these verses that support my assertion. Ezra chapter 7 and verse 6 says, this Ezra went up from Babylon, and he was already scribe in the law of Moses, which Jehovah, God of Israel, had given. So here it is, Jehovah, God of Israel, gave Moses the law of Moses. Nehemiah 8 and verse 1 says, and all the people gathered themselves together as one man into the street that was before the water gate. And they spake unto Ezra the scribe to bring the book of the law of Moses, which Jehovah had commanded to Israel. There it is again. The book of the law of Moses was actually commanded by Jehovah to Israel. My friends, the Bible says in God's law that at the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, every matter shall be established. Ezra and Nehemiah were 2 witnesses, but listen to what God stated through his prophet Malachi in Malachi 4 and verse 4. This is what God says. Remember ye the law of Moses, my servant, which I commanded unto him in Horeb for all Israel, with the statutes and judgments. Horeb here is another name for Sinai. So God was saying that I commanded the law of Moses for all Israel at Mount Sinai. And that can be found in Exodus chapter 20 onwards. Moses was a prophet of God. And a prophet, simply put, is a spokesman for God. Let me look at the word prophet so you can have a good idea of what the Hebrew and what is meant by the word prophet. So let me go to the Blue Letter Bible and we'll look at the original Hebrew word for prophet. So I'll be looking for the word prophet and tell you and show you what it is, what it means. Prophet occurs 244 times in 227 verses in the King James Version. That's the English word prophet. The Hebrew word for prophet is the Strong's number H5030. And it is pronounced as Navi. And I'll play the sound for you.
Strong's H5030. Navi. Navi.
Navi. And that word Navi, that Hebrew word, occurs 316 times in the Hebrew scriptures. It is translated as prophet 312 times. Prophecy, 1 time. Them that prophesy, 1 time. And the outline of biblical usage, a prophet, simply put, is a spokesman, a speaker, or a prophet. It can be a prophet of God, a true prophet. It can be a false prophet or a heathen prophet. So the word prophet simply means a spokesman for God. Let's go back to the study notes. Notice these verses in Deuteronomy chapter 18 that proves the point that prophets speak the words of God. Deuteronomy 18, reading from verse 15. Jehovah thy God will raise up unto thee a prophet from the midst of thee, of thy brethren, like unto me, in reference to Moses. This is Moses who was speaking. Unto him he shall hearken. And verse 16 says, according to all that thou desirest of Jehovah thy God in Horeb, in the day of the assembly, saying, let me not hear again the voice of Jehovah my God, neither let me see this great fire anymore, that I die not. Remember in my previous video, when I referenced the fact that God married Israel at Mount Sinai, the Bible told us that Jehovah descended on Mount Sinai in fire. And there was lightnings and thunderings, and there were trumpets. And the people were so afraid that they said to Moses, don't let God speak to us. You speak to us. Let God speak to you, and you speak to us, lest we die. So Moses is now recounting that incident in Deuteronomy, and he's saying to the people, remember, you said to me, let me not hear again the voice of Jehovah my God, neither let me see this great fire anymore, that I die not. And Jehovah said unto me, Moses, they have well spoken that which they have spoken. Verse 18 says, and notice these words, I will raise them up a prophet. This is God speaking. I will raise them up a prophet from among their brethren, like unto thee. So God was going to raise up a prophet like Moses, and will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak unto them all that I shall command him. So prophets speak the words that God command them. This prophet that Jehovah, the one true God, was speaking about was none other than Yeshua, or Jesus Christ. Verse 19 says, and it shall come to pass that whosoever will not hearken unto my words, which he shall speak in my name, I will require it of him. Friends, verse 20 goes on to say, but the prophet which shall presume to speak a word in my name, which I have not commanded him to speak, or that prophet, or that shall speak in the name of other gods, even that prophet shall die. So false prophets were to be put to death. Verse 21 says, and if thou say in thine heart, how shall we know the word which Jehovah hath not spoken? Notice God's response. When a prophet speaketh in the name of Jehovah, if the thing follow not, nor come to pass, that is the thing which Jehovah hath not spoken. But the prophet had spoken it presumptuously. Thou shalt not be afraid of him. Verse 22 gives us the test of a true prophet. And we know that there have been many false prophets who have told a lot of lies on God over the years. Many persons have said, God told me to tell you this, and God told me that this will happen. And when you check it out, what they said that God said will happen did not happen. So they were proven to be false prophets. Friends, let me do a little exegesis of Deuteronomy 24, verse 1 to 4, and extract what has been clearly stated in the text. Moses, under the inspiration of God, wrote that a husband can and may, notice, A husband can and may, he doesn't have to, may divorce his wife if she finds no favor in his eyes because he had found some uncleanness in her. That is according to Deuteronomy 24, verse 1. Or he can divorce his wife if he hate her. That is according to Deuteronomy 24, verse 3. We need to take the scriptures as they read, and that is precisely what the text says. However, if a man was determined to divorce his wife because he has found some uncleanness in her, or if he hates her, God laid down 3 stipulations in the law that must be followed by the man. Here are these stipulations. 1, the husband must write his wife a bill or certificate of divorcement. So he must draft up divorce papers. 2, he must deliver the bill or certificate of divorcement to his wife and put it in her hand. This legal document must be given and properly served by putting it in her hand. And the 3rd stipulation to complete the divorce process is that the husband must put her out of his house and send her away. Putting her out of the house and sending her away is the final step of the divorce process. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that is God's law on divorce. And all 3 stipulations are required for a divorce to be official and recognized by God as lawful. You see, a husband was not allowed to deal treacherously with his wife by merely sending her out of his house. Sending her out of his house and into the streets without the bill of divorcement was not lawful and is referred to as putting away. It is the provision of the bill of divorcement as per the law in Deuteronomy 24 that breaks the marriage bond or contract. The term divorce simply means the legal termination or dissolution of a marriage. And it's only the giving of the bill of divorcement that makes a divorce legal and lawful. Friends, what many persons fail to realize and understand is that God instituted the divorce law as a protective mechanism for the woman in what was a patriarchal society. In the previous video, I clearly established the fact that in the Old Testament, polygyny was practiced, where men were allowed to have multiple wives, but women could only have one husband at a time. The bill of divorcement given into the hand of the woman provided her with the physical evidence that she was lawfully divorced, and this gave her the requisite protection in the event that she was falsely accused of adultery. Very important. If a woman was only put away without the bill of divorcement, she would be left destitute and without a home. She would still be legally married to her husband and therefore could not remarry. If she then proceeded to cohabit with another man as a means to support herself, both woman and man would be guilty of adultery, which was a capital offense punishable by stoning under the Old Covenant law. Here, my friends, is the judgment that God prescribed for those who committed adultery as recorded in Leviticus chapter 20, verse 10. Notice what was the punishment for adultery. Leviticus chapter 20 and verse 10 says, "And the man that committed adultery with another man's wife, even he that committed adultery with his neighbor's wife, the adulterer and the adulteress shall surely be put to death." That was the law if adultery was committed. See also Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 22. If a man be found lying with a woman married to an husband, then they shall both of them die. Both the man that lay with the woman and the woman, so shall thou put away evil from Israel. Verse 23 says, if a damsel that is a virgin be betrothed unto an husband, meaning she is engaged, and a man find her in the city and lie with her, then ye shall bring them both out unto the gate of that city, and ye shall stone them with stones that they die. The damsel, because she cried not, being in the city, and the man, because he had humbled his neighbor's wife. So thou shalt put away evil from among you. So if the woman did not cry out for help in the city, then it would be seen that she was complicit in the act of adultery, being a woman betrothed unto an husband. Friends, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this was a very serious issue because it was a matter of life and death. And this is precisely why God gave the commandment that if, doesn't have to happen, if a man chose to divorce his wife, he must give her a bill of divorcement as evidence. Deuteronomy 24 verse 1 speaks to the biblical fact that divorce was authorized and allowed by God. Deuteronomy 24 verse 2 also allows for remarriage because the law states that once the woman has the bill of divorcement, she is now free, single, and disengaged. And the Bible says that she may go and be another man's wife. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the only way that a divorced woman can be another man's wife is through the process of remarriage. Therefore, those churches that continue to teach that a divorced person commits adultery if they remarry are not only wrong, but they are not rightly dividing the word of truth, according to 2 Timothy verse 2 to 15. Deuteronomy 24 and verse 3 is also crucial because it is a restatement of verse 1. But this time, the reason for divorce is if the latter husband hates her. Again, the mere fact that the verse mentions the latter husband means that remarriage has taken place. That is just flawless logic. Once the woman is divorced and has remarried, she will now have a former or first husband and a latter or second husband. Notice as well, my friends, that the woman's second husband must follow the same stipulations laid down in the law. If a husband is determined to divorce his wife, then he must 1, write her a bill of divorcement, 2, give it in her hand, and 3, send her out of his house. Deuteronomy 24 and verse 3 also tells us that there are 2 ways that a marriage can come to an end: divorce or death, whichever comes first. Because the Bible says that she may go and be another man's wife, but if the latter husband hates her and write her a bill of divorcement, give it in her hand, and send her out of his house, or if the latter husband dies, which means the marriage will come to an end automatically by virtue of his death, the woman now becomes free. She can now go and be another man's wife. It is therefore fallacy and wrong to teach that only death breaks the marriage bond. There is no biblical basis for such a view, according to the divorce law found in Deuteronomy chapter 24, verse 1 to 4. Deuteronomy 24, 3 to 4 states that if a divorced woman remarries, then her former husband, that is her first husband, which sent her away, may not take her again to be his wife. According to the law, she is defiled, and to do so is an abomination before Jehovah, and this will cause the land to sin. Not my words, those are the words of God himself. So let's continue. So it is therefore absolutely wrong to teach that a divorced individual should return to and remarry their former spouse. The argument that is made says that the first marriage is the only marriage that is recognized by God, because the second marriage is quote unquote adulterous. You may have heard such an argument before, but that view is in direct contravention of the law of God found in Deuteronomy 24, verse 4, and is indeed an abomination in the sight of God. Before proceeding, I would like to address the reasons for divorce according to Deuteronomy 24, 1 to 3. From the text, we can identify 2 reasons why a husband may decide to divorce his wife. 1, she finds no favor in his eyes because he had found some uncleanness in her. And 2, if her husband hates her. In the first instance, the husband may feel that he cannot continue to live with his wife because in his eyes, the uncleanness is too distasteful for him to accept. Notice that the uncleanness was determined solely by the husband, and his reason for wanting a divorce was not questioned. However, the uncleanness does not necessitate him divorcing her, nor was he obligated to do so. If the husband did not have any hardness in his heart towards his wife, he could choose to forgive and still look upon her with favor in his eyes. Friends, the Hebrew word translated as uncleanness is erva, which is the Strong's number H6172, which can also mean nakedness, shame, indecency, or improper behavior. Erva is often used in relation to sexual activity. Let me look at that word in the Blue Letter Bible for completeness. Let's go to the Blue Letter Bible and look at Deuteronomy chapter 24, verses 1, which uses the word erva. It says, when a man had taken a wife and married her, and it come to pass that she find no favor in his eyes, because he had found some uncleanness in her, then he was to write her a bill of divorcement and give it in her hand and send her out of his house. The word uncleanness is erva. This is the sound.
Strong's H6172. Erva. Erva.
Okay, erva. And it occurs 54 times in the Hebrew scriptures. It is translated nakedness 50 times, shame 1 time, unclean 1 time, and uncleanness 1 time. This is the outline of biblical usage. It means nakedness, nudity, shame, pudenda. Pudenda means implying shameful exposure. Nakedness of a thing, indecency, improper behavior. It can also be used figuratively as exposed or undefended. And it is used mostly in relation to nakedness, someone's nakedness, as can be seen in Leviticus chapter 18, which speaks about the nakedness of thy father or the nakedness of thy mother and so on. So that is the meaning of the word erva. So let's go back to the study notes. So what is certain from the text in Deuteronomy 24 and verse 1 is that the uncleanness that the husband has found was not of a sexual nature. And I'll tell you why. I've come to that conclusion. It had nothing to do with adultery, because if it had, then the law required the death penalty, according to Leviticus 20, verse 10, and Deuteronomy 22, verse 22, which we read earlier. And the text says that if she finds no favor in his eyes because he had found some uncleanness in her, if he had proof that she had committed adultery with him, then he had all right to have her stoned. Under the old covenant, fornication or adultery was never a reason for divorce. I want to repeat this. Under the old covenant, fornication or adultery was never a reason for divorce, because if there was proof of marital infidelity, then the penalty was death by stoning. This is very important because divorce was never a remedy for adultery according to the scriptures, and we have to stick to the scriptures. The law of God is accompanied by relevant statutes and judgments, which has remedies for various sins or allegations of a sexual nature. God gave commandments. You have the 10 commandments. He also gave statutes, and statutes, simply put, are what explain the commandments. And then God gives us judgments, which are the penalty or the punishment that was to be meted out for persons who broke the commandments and the statutes. Again, the uncleanness referred to in Deuteronomy chapter 24 and verse 1 was not of a sexual nature. If the uncleanness was related to premarital sex that called the woman's virginity into question, then there was a separate statute and judgment that was to be applied in such situations. Let's read Deuteronomy 22, verse 13 to 21 in the Blue Letter Bible. Deuteronomy 22, verse 13 to 21. This is critical. So God has many statutes and judgments for different sins. Deuteronomy 22, verse 13 to 21. Let's go again to the Blue Letter Bible and we'll read the text together. Deuteronomy 22, verses 13 to 21. This is the relevant judgment and statutes that govern how a woman that has been unfaithful before she, well, for a woman that has committed adultery, that has committed fornication before she was married. If any man take a wife and go in unto her and hate her and give occasion of speech against her and bring up an evil name upon her and say, I took this woman, and when I came to her, I found her not a maid. So it means that she would have had premarital sex. Deuteronomy 22, verse 15 says, then shall the father of the damsel and their mother take and bring forth the tokens of the damsel's virginity unto the elders of the city in the gate. And the damsel's father shall say unto the elders, I gave my daughter unto this man to wife, and he hated her. And lo, he had given occasion of speech against her, saying, I found not thy daughter a maid, and yet these are the tokens of my daughter's virginity. And they shall spread the cloth before the elders of the city. And the elders of that city shall take that man and chastise him. And they shall amerce him or fine him 100 shekels of silver, and give them unto the father of the damsel, because he hath brought up an evil name upon a virgin of Israel. And she shall be his wife, he may not put her away all his days. This verse in Deuteronomy 22, verse 19, is the only verse, is one of the verses, and the only way that divorce was not permitted. If a man brought an evil report upon a virgin of Israel, God says his punishment shall be, she shall be his wife, he may not put her away all his days. So as long as he lives, she will be his wife. But notice what the passage goes on to say. But if this thing be true, that is, she had premarital sex and she was not a virgin at the time of her marriage, and the tokens of her virginity be not found for the damsel, this is the punishment. Then they shall bring out the damsel to the door of her father's house, and the men of her city shall stone her with stones, that she die, because she hath wrought folly in Israel, to play the whore in her father's house. So shall thou put evil away from among you. So that is how that was to be treated if the woman had premarital sex and she was not a virgin when she got married. The Bible tells us that if that was the case, she was to be stoned, so she was still going to die. So if a husband, so there's another remedy for if the husband suspects that his wife has committed adultery or is being unfaithful without proof. So if the husband suspects that his wife is being unfaithful, but he has no proof, there's a remedy for that as well in the law. The law of God prescribed a unique procedure that was to be followed, my friends. I like to be very detailed, as you may be aware by now, and present the facts in support of any and everything that is stated. So let's read the relevant passage that outlines what was to be done, because many persons are unaware of this procedure that was to be followed. This procedure, that was to be undertaken, can be found in Numbers chapter 5. It's a little lengthy, but it's worth mentioning because it is very important. And this will also prove that the uncleanness that the husband has found had nothing to do of a sexual nature. Numbers chapter 5, reading from verse 11. And Jehovah spake unto Moses, saying, so there it is again, it is God commanding Moses what the law and judgment is to be according to the law of Moses. And Jehovah spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto the children of Israel and say unto them, if any man's wife go aside and commit a trespass against him, and the man lie with her carnally, and it be hid from the eyes of her husband, so your husband has no knowledge of it, and be kept close, and she be defiled, and there be no witness against her, neither she be taken with the manner. So she is not caught in the act. There is no witness to the act. The Bible tells us that if the spirit of jealousy come upon him, that is a husband, and he be jealous of his wife, and she be defiled, or if the spirit of jealousy come upon him, and he be jealous of his wife, and she be not defiled, then, my friends, shall the man bring his wife unto the priest, and he shall bring her offering for her, the 10th part of an ephah of barley meal. He shall pour no oil upon it, nor put frankincense thereon, for it is an offering of jealousy, an offering of memorial, bringing iniquity to remembrance. And the priest shall bring her near and set her before Jehovah. And the priest shall take holy water in an earthen vessel, and of the dust that is in the floor of the tabernacle, the priest shall take and put it into the water. Verse 18 says, and the priest shall set the woman before Jehovah, and uncover the woman's head, and put the offering of memorial in her hands, which is the jealousy offering. And the priest shall have in his hand the bitter water that causeth the curse. And the priest shall charge her by an oath, and say unto the woman, this is what the priest will say to her, if no man hath lain with thee, and if thou hast not gone aside to uncleanness, there is the word uncleanness, with another instead of thy husband, be thou free from this bitter water that causeth the curse. But if thou hast gone aside to another instead of thy husband, and if thou be defiled, and some man have lain with thee beside thine husband, then the priest shall charge the woman with an oath of cursing, and the priest shall say unto the woman, Jehovah make thee a curse, and an oath among the people, when Jehovah doth make thy thigh to rot and thy belly to swell. So if once she drinks the bitter water, if she was unfaithful, then what will happen to her? Her thighs will rot and her belly will swell. Goes on to say, and this water that causeth the curse shall go into thy bowels to make thy belly to swell and thy thigh to rot. And the woman shall say, Amen, Amen. So she is going to say, so let it be. And the priest shall write these curses in a book, and he shall blot them out with the bitter water. And he shall cause the woman to drink the bitter water that causeth the curse, and the water that causeth the curse shall enter into her and become bitter. Then the priest shall take the jealousy offering out of the woman's hand, and shall wave the offering before Jehovah, and offer it upon the altar. And the priest shall take an handful of the offering, even the memorial thereof, and burn it upon the altar, and afterward shall cause the woman to drink the water. And when he had made her to drink the water, then it shall come to pass that if she be defiled and have done trespass against her husband, that the water that causeth the curse shall enter into her and become bitter, and her belly shall swell, and her thigh shall rot, and the woman shall be a curse among her people. And if the woman be not defiled, so God is fair, but be clean, then she shall be free and shall conceive seed. This is the law of jealousies, when a wife goeth aside to another instead of her husband, and is defiled, or when the spirit of jealousy cometh upon him, and he be jealous over his wife, and shall set the woman before Jehovah, and the priest shall execute upon her all this law. Then shall the man be guiltless from iniquity, and the woman shall bear her iniquity. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this once again proves that divorce was never a solution for adultery. The bitter water test was geared towards providing the evidence to prove whether a man's wife has committed adultery or not. If her belly begins to swell and her thigh starts to rot, then that was the necessary proof that she was unfaithful, and the penalty would be death by stoning. My friends, what I presented is the biblical view on marriage, divorce, and remarriage as is found in God's law in Deuteronomy chapter 24, verse 1 to 4. In my next video, I'll be looking at the two Hebrew words that are at the heart of the confusion as it relates to divorce and remarriage. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I will prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that this confusion has been caused because of how these two Hebrew words have been mistranslated. So you have seen the evidence that I presented, that indeed divorce was allowed, it was authorized by God, and remarriage was also allowed. The law can be found in Deuteronomy chapter 24, verse 1 to 4. If this was a blessing to you, I encourage you to share this video, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and as soon as the next video is uploaded, hit the notification bell so that you will be notified. I thank you for listening, and what I have presented is the biblical view on marriage, divorce, and remarriage. My next video, we will be looking at divorce and putting away. I'll show then the difference between divorce and putting away. These two Hebrew words are at the heart of the misunderstanding of this very important topic. And many persons have been living with guilt because they have been divorced. And many churches are saying that if you were not divorced on biblical grounds, then you cannot remarry. And I have proven without a shadow of a doubt that the law of God found in Deuteronomy chapter 24 and verse 1 to 4 provides for divorce, and it also provides for remarriage. I hope that this video was a blessing. Please share, like, and subscribe. Leave a comment. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And may God continue to bless us richly in Jesus Christ. Have yourselves a wonderful day.